What's good, YouTube? Welcome back. Thank you for clicking onto this reaction. I hope you're looking forward to it just as much as I am. If you haven't already, head over to the content creators page. That link is in the description box down below. If you haven't already and you're enjoying our content, you know what you need to do. You need to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, but we're going to jump straight into this one. So, Belisarius, the Sassanid Invasion, Part 5. Let's go.
540 AD. Khosrow, Sassanid king of Persia, is invading the Eastern Roman Empire. His huge army marches along the banks of the Euphrates River. Sura falls before them. Hierapolis is ransomed for 2,000 pounds of silver. Berea burns. Then, to the horror of all Romans, Khosrow takes Antioch, second city of the empire, the Roman capital of the Near East.
Literally, it was mentioned in the last episode that all the manpower of the East was sent to the West. So, of course, it was easy for the Sassanids to sort of take these three positions.
The city burns. Soldiers flee. Civilians are massacred. The historian Procopius writes, "I become dizzy as I write about such a great calamity, and transmit it to future times to remember.
Wow.
I cannot understand why it should be God's will to exalt the fortunes of a man or place, and then to obliterate them for no cause that is apparent to us."
Might not be apparent to you, but it is apparent. I mean, there are reasons.
After years of victories, Justinian's empire is rocked by this devastating onslaught.
Let's see how this great man deals with this this situation.
The emperor can send only his cousin Germanus and 300 soldiers, with a promise of a great army to follow. But
imagine being that commander of 300 warriors going against a Sassanid army, but you're not going to fight them. You're just going to sort of delay them and sort of shadow them and get information from them, right?
there is no great army.
Oh, there's just no great army.
Roman forces are tied down fighting Justinian's wars in the west. Instead, he will dispatch his greatest general, Belisarius, and pray for a miracle.
And we all know Belisarius is going to be able to provide us with that miracle.
Little knowing that the empire is about to be plunged into an even greater catastrophe, unlike anything the world has ever seen before. For years, the Eastern Roman and Sassanid empires, the two great powers of the Middle East, had signed a treaty of eternal peace just 8 years before.
Oh, there was no way that was going to be an eternal peace. You're all just lying.
But Khosrow had looked on with growing alarm, as Roman forces, led by Belisarius, had reconquered first North Africa, then Italy. Half in jest, Khosrow asks Justinian for his share of the tribute, since these victories are only possible because he's granted the Romans peace. But the joke is wearing thin. Khosrow receives envoys from the Goths in Italy and the Armenians, who beg him for aid. Justinian, they tell him, has conceived the desire of seizing the entire earth. He will march against the Persians with those he has already enslaved, respecting neither the name of friendship nor any of his sworn promises.
I mean,
in 540...
to be absolutely honest with you, I think that if he conquered the western part of the Roman Empire, he would have then turned his eyes towards the Sassanid Empire if he got it done in time, and he was still alive to do so. It definitely would have happened.
Khosrow accuses the Eastern Emperor of paying Huns to raid Persian land and trying to bribe his Arab allies to switch sides. Then he attacks.
Once again, do we know if that probably was the case? Do we know if it wasn't? How can we guarantee it wasn't? Like, a lot of political leaders would do things like that. Make alliances with other an enemy's neighbours to harass them.
Justinian has stripped the frontier of its best troops to reinforce his army in Italy. there is no Roman force that can stand up to Khosrow's invasion. Antioch is sacked. Survivors are enslaved and sent to Persia. Khosrow then marches to the coast and symbolically bathes in the waters of the Mediterranean. He moves on to Apamea, where he demands 1,000 pounds of silver, but lets the priests keep their piece of the true cross. He then fixes the local chariot race, so that Justinian's favourite team, the Blues, lose.
Oh dear.
Justinian agrees to pay Khosrow 5,000 pounds of gold, with 500 more to be paid annually, in exchange for a truce. Satisfied, Khosrow sets off for home. However, he does not let the truce prevent him from extorting several more payments en route.
I mean, of course you're going to. I mean, I would.
It is the Eastern Roman Empire's greatest military humiliation in 3 centuries.
And I bet it doesn't make Justinian look good at all.
Everyone was talking about Belisarius. He was credited with 2 victories such as never before fallen to the lot of one man. He had brought 2 kings captive to Constantinople, and beyond all expectation had made Roman spoils of the nations and wealth of Geseric and Theodoric. In the Eastern Roman capital, Belisarius has been welcomed back from Italy as a hero.
Okay, how's that
He and his entourage draw admiring crowds wherever they go. But he does not have long to enjoy his success. In early 541, Justinian sends Belisarius east to take command of Roman forces in Syria and ensure there is no repeat of the previous year's disaster. Belisarius's wife, Antonina, has accompanied him on previous campaigns to North Africa and Italy and proved herself a valuable advisor and deputy.
And is she with him this time again?
But this time, she remains in Constantinople to advise her friend and patron, Empress Theodora.
Interesting.
Belisarius gathers all available forces at Dara, site of his great victory 11 years before. He has his own household troops, the elite Bucellari, Ostrogoths who've joined him in Italy, Rome's Sassanid Arab allies, led by Al-Harith, and several thousand Limitani, the Empire's frontier troops. Procopius does not tell us the size of these forces, so we can only make educated guesses based on circumstantial evidence.
Oh, I see.
Local Roman forces are shaken by the events of the previous year. Belisarius spends several weeks reorganizing these men, re-equipping them, and rebuilding their shattered morale.
How many of them are veterans? That is the question. Like, you know,
when Belisarius learns that Khosrow and the main Persian army are far away in the north, campaigning in Lazica, he decides to go on the offensive and targets the Persian city of Nisibis. This fortified frontier city is too strong to assault directly, but Belisarius hopes the garrison can be lured out and defeated in battle, allowing his troops to rush into the city, mingled with the retreating enemy.
Interesting.
Belisarius camps 5 miles from Nisibis, close enough to tempt the Persians to attack, but far enough that they can't easily retreat back to the city. But one Roman commander, Peter, camps far too close. Worse, he ignores Belisarius's warning to be on high alert at noon.
He's just going to get caught and absolutely slaughtered, isn't he? Belisarius needs to leave him alone. Let him
when the Persians are most likely to strike. The Persian commander, Nabidis, spots this isolated Roman force and attacks. Peter immediately sends a rider to Belisarius calling for aid.
No!
But Belisarius and the rest of the army have already seen what's happening and are on their way. Before they can reach Peter, his force is hit by the Persian cavalry. After a brief fight, his troops scatter. 50 men are killed, a Roman standard is lost.
It's only 50 men killed. I'm surprised.
When Belisarius arrives with reinforcements, he drives off the Persians, who retreat into the city, leaving behind more than 100 dead.
Oh, okay.
But the loss of a Roman standard in such a pointless skirmish is a bitter blow.
But that morale, it's just going to reduce that morale.
Belisarius marches on to the Persian fort at Sassanid. His first attack is repelled. He digs in for a siege, while ordering Al-Harith's Arabs and 1,200 Bukilari to cross the Tigris River and raid deep into Assyria.
Literally calls a hit to their morale and their populace's morale as well, and calls rife division. That would be sort of interesting to see.
It has been many years since the Romans have raided this far into Persian territory. There is little resistance and much plunder.
Literally nothing they could do.
Sassanid runs out of food and surrenders to Belisarius. But the Roman general has run out of time. His troops are exhausted by the extreme summer heat, and a third are sick. His Limitani wish to return to their homes, now threatened by the start of the Arab raiding season, while Al-Harith and his men have gone AWOL. It later emerges they've ridden straight home to avoid sharing their loot with the Romans.
I hope they have repercussions for that decision. Belisarius needs to go back, slap him in the behind, and show them who's boss and what they shouldn't have done.
Belisarius, having achieved as much as he can with his limited force, withdraws back into Roman territory.
Was it worth it? Was it really worth it?
At the opening of spring, Khosrow, son of Kavad, for the third time began an invasion into the land of the Romans with a large army, keeping the Euphrates River on the right. The Emperor Justinian, upon learning of the inroad of the Persians, sent Belisarius against them once more. 542 AD. Belisarius spends the winter in Constantinople, but in early spring, news arrives that Khosrow is preparing to invade again.
At least
Belisarius races back to the eastern front, using horses of the famous Cursus Publicus, the Roman postal service, with fresh remounts at every stage. A journey that normally takes a month can be completed in around 8 days.
8 days?
Local commanders warn that Khosrow is approaching with the biggest army yet. They want to hole up in Hierapolis and hide behind its strong walls. Belisarius has a different plan.
What are you going to do?
If Khosrow were attacking any other people but Romans, this plan of yours would be safe and sensible. But as immediately after leaving here, this barbarian plans to fall upon some other territory of the Emperor, be assured that to die bravely would be better in every way than to be saved without a fight.
I see.
For this would justly be called not...
So, like, he knows that they won't necessarily stay for a long siege if it becomes too difficult, and they would move on and just pillage. So in this situation, you sort of have to take them on head on.
Salvation, but treason. So come as quickly as possible to Europos, where, after collecting the whole army, I hope to deal with the enemy as God permits. Khosrow is counting on another lucrative plundering expedition. This time he plans to raid Palestine and pillage Jerusalem. But when he hears Belisarius himself has arrived and is gathering a Roman army at Europos, he hesitates.
Yeah, he knows he needs to be worried. He needs to be worried. Belisarius is there, literally holding the Roman Empire single-handedly. I wouldn't say single-handedly. It seems like Justinian's doing a lot of the political side of things, which obviously I don't think Belisarius has the ability to do. Or he probably does, but he's just not able to do it because he's being a general, you know.
Envoy Abandanes to meet Belisarius on the pretext of reopening negotiations, but really to gauge his strength. For almost the first time in 10 years, Procopius is not at Belisarius' side.
Okay.
He has remained in Constantinople. In fact, his days of campaigning with the great Roman general are over. Nonetheless,
Did he just get too old? Did he didn't want to do the travelling anymore? Is there any reason for that?
he provides a detailed description of what follows. Belisarius meets Chosro's envoy far from the Roman camp, surrounded by an imposing number of his most fearsome warriors, including Thracians, Illyrians, Goths, and Vandals.
But keeps it secret of how many men he actually has.
They have been hand-picked to make an impression. All are tall, strongly built men, armed to the teeth, and seem completely unconcerned by the arrival of a Persian envoy. Belisarius himself speaks in a carefree manner. This course that Chosro has chosen is not how men usually behave. If other men have a dispute with their neighbour, they first try to negotiate with him, and only go to war if they do not receive satisfaction. But he
just comes straight in.
Comes into the midst of the Romans, and then makes suggestions about peace. With that, Belisarius dismisses the envoy.
Belisarius is just a big old Chad. Honestly, this man has big dick energy. Just absolute, just boss.
The envoy returns to Chosro and urges the king to avoid battle at all costs. The enemy are not like any men he's seen before. They are formidable and disciplined. Their commander is wise and imposing. The king should withdraw as soon as possible.
Yes, he should.
Chosro takes his advice.
Nice.
The Persian army crosses the Euphrates and marches home. Belisarius appears to have bluffed a stronger enemy into retreat and saved huge swathes of the empire from plunder and pillage.
Oh my god, Belisarius is such a G. Oh my god. Literally, he's such a goat. Honestly. Jokes. Just turning the whole army away. That's absolutely hilarious.
Romans praised Belisarius. He seemed to have achieved greater glory in their eyes by this feat than when he brought Gelimer or Vitiges captive to Constantinople.
Yeah. In
truth, it was an achievement of great importance and deserving great praise, at a time when all the Romans were hiding in terror behind their defences. Belisarius and his Bucalari, putting on a show that is so intimidating and deceptive that the Persian king abandons his campaign. It's a famous and memorable scene. But did it ever happen? Many historians believe that something even more terrifying caused Chosro's rapid withdrawal. Really? He discovered the empire was riddled with plague.
Interesting.
During
So
these times, there was a pestilence which came close to wiping out the whole of mankind. Now, in the case of all other scourges sent from heaven, some explanation or cause might be given by daring men. But for this calamity, it is quite impossible either to express in words or to conceive in thought any explanation, except indeed to refer it to God.
So do you think it was the plague that turned him around, or do you think that situation actually happened?
The 6th century world is full of strange and mysterious phenomena. Sometimes even a highly educated man like Procopius can only record his observations and trust in God. Of the year 536, he wrote, "It came about during this year that a most dread portent took place. The whole year the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, and it seemed much like an eclipse, for its beams were not clear, nor like those it usually makes. From the time when this thing happened, men were free neither from war, nor pestilence, nor any other thing that brings death."
Once again, if you don't know that it's an eruption from a volcano that's caused ash to sort of cover this, You don't know what's going on, and you would think that it's the end of the world. And at that point, if it's the end of the world, there's no laws or just morals. You got to do what you got to do. So I understand why it goes into such a dark period around these sort of times.
Experts now believe Procopius was observing the atmospheric
I agree, like, there was probably some amount of truth to it, but it was probably just exaggerated.
Aftermath of a massive volcanic eruption. In fact, a cluster of volcanic activity around this date would help to trigger what's become known as the Late Antique Little Ice Age.
Oh, okay.
Its impact is impossible to measure, but it may have contributed to food shortages and worsened the famine that Procopius witnessed in Italy. Such shortages,
and it lasted what, around 80 years?
Made the population weaker and more vulnerable to what came next.
Years.
It originated among the Egyptians who live in Pelusium. From there it branched out in two directions. The first moving to Alexandria and then the rest of Egypt. The second coming to the Palestinians who live by the border of Egypt.
Imagine that as well. Imagine hearing the rumours of this dark cloud that is just slowly covering the world, and you wouldn't believe it, and then you'd see it. You would think that it is the end of the world. How scary would that be? It'd be absolutely terrifying.
Plague is first recorded in the Nile Delta in 541. It spreads across Egypt and into coastal Palestine. In spring 542, it reaches the imperial capital, Constantinople. It spreads rapidly across the empire. In 543, plague reaches Persian-ruled Armenia and the kingdom of the Franks. Recently, plague victims have even been identified in Anglo-Saxon England. Procopius is in Constantinople when the plague strikes with full, terrifying force. They fell ill in the following way. Suddenly they became feverish. Some of them when they rose from sleep, others while they walked about or doing any small thing. The body did not change colour or become warm like a regular fever, nor did it burn up. Rather, at first, the fever was so mild that it gave no cause for alarm, either to
literally a silent, deadly killer.
Victims or the doctors who treated them. But then on the same day or the next,
as well,
a bubonic swelling appeared. This happened around the groin, also inside the armpit, sometimes by the ears or the thigh. Some victims, Procopius writes, fall into a coma-like state, unable to feed or care for themselves. Others are seized by madness, shouting wildly and running into the streets.
Because they know what's going to happen, there's no stopping it.
Some died immediately, others after many days. In some cases, the body blossomed with dark pustules about the size of a lentil. These people did not survive a single day. They all died immediately. Many others suddenly began to vomit blood and perished immediately.
Petrifying. It's the stuff of horrors. Especially back then when you didn't know.
I must also state that the most eminent doctors predicted that many would die who shortly afterwards were unexpectedly free of all sickness. They also claimed that many would survive who were destined to perish almost immediately. Thus,
they literally had no fucking clue what they were doing.
There was no cause behind this disease that any human reason could grasp. For in all cases, the outcome made little sense. DNA analysis of human remains from this and later pandemics has identified the cause of this terrifying disease, a deadly bacterium called Yersinia pestis. Procopius is at the center of the world's first bubonic plague pandemic. The second,
look at that drawing there.
Centuries later, is known as the Black Death. The peak of the pandemic lasts 3 months. On the very worst days, the death toll in Constantinople alone may be as high as 10,000.
It only lasted 3 months.
Between a third and half the city's population perish. Entire
That's crazy numbers, though. Crazy numbers that perish.
households are wiped out. The city's graveyards overflow, and corpses are crammed into city watchtowers. It was not easy in those times to see anyone out and about, for all were holed up in their homes.
Scared that they might have this mysterious thing infect them and they die too. You wouldn't want to leave. Look how we were during COVID, and that wasn't even killing us, let alone the actual plague.
Happened to chance upon someone going out, he was carrying one of the dead. All work came to a standstill. The plague hits the Empire's great cities hardest, but the pestilence also reaches deep into the countryside. Then Emperor Justinian himself falls sick. News soon reaches the army in Syria. There are even rumors that the emperor is already dead. Belisarius and his generals discuss the situation, but we have no reliable information on what is said or by whom.
Yeah, of course.
Justinian has no children. The succession will be an uncertain and dangerous time. Their own role may be decisive. They may even discuss who among them is best placed to succeed the emperor. Unexpectedly, Justinian makes a full recovery. But Empress Theodora has learned of the
That's so surprising. That's so surprising.
Meeting in Syria.
As if he
Her
survived.
informers tell her that Belisarius and another general, Buzes, had said they would not support any new emperor proclaimed in Constantinople. Theodora regards these words as treason.
What?
A clear sign they will turn against her if her husband should die.
Oh, I see.
Belisarius and Buzes are summoned to Constantinople for questioning. Theodora cannot prove their treason, but both men experience a sudden, dramatic fall from favor.
Of course.
Procopius claims that Buzes spends more than 2 years in a secret prison. Belisarius, the emperor's most successful general, escapes imprisonment, but his disgrace is total. He is dismissed from command and loses much of his fortune. His famed bucellari are split up and distributed amongst other commanders.
That's a big hit. Your guard being split up and distributed between other commanders, that's a massive fucking hit.
Belisarius lives in Constantinople as a private citizen for more than a year. While abroad, Justinian's empire slides towards crisis. The plague has killed a multitude of Roman citizens and soldiers and severely disrupted government, trade, and taxation. In Armenia, a Roman offensive ends in humiliating defeat. In North Africa, Berber rebels defeat the Romans and kill Solomon, the governor. While in Italy, the Ostrogoths have rallied under a new king, Totila, retaken most of Belisarius's gains, and again threaten Rome itself. Justinian is desperate for a general who can take command in Italy and turn the tide of war.
And we all know who he's going to turn to, aren't we?
544 AD. Belisarius is recalled from disgrace and given back his old command in Italy. But the emperor has no troops to spare, and Belisarius's bucellari are still in the east. This time he will have only 4,000 recruits that he must hire and equip himself to reinforce the demoralized army in Italy. And in Totila, he faces a far more dangerous adversary than before. He is poorly resourced and has been ungratefully treated by his emperor. But Belisarius loyally marches to war again, in what will prove his final campaign.
My God, this man's loyalty.
Big thanks to legendary.
Goddamn loyalty is so strong. What a great series by Extra History TV. Thoroughly enjoying this. This is what I mean. It just